Welcome to this episode of Everything Compliance, Shout Outs and Rants. Today we have the quartet of Matt Kelly, Jonathan Marks, Jay Rosen, and Tom Fox. With that, we are now on to Shout Outs and Rants. And as Mr. Marks has not been with us for several weeks, I'm sure he's loaded for bear. But we're going to go with the same order. Matt, Jonathan, Jay, and I will end up. What do you got for us, Matt?
Yeah, so I am going to go to the world of sports and rant about this live golf tournament. Is it live or leave or whatever they call it from Saudi Arabia? I have to admit, I am not a golf fan most of the time, but I am really not a fan of what Saudi Arabia is doing here or the many American golfers who are more than happy to take their cash and do this with them. Saudi Arabia is very clearly trying to buy its way back into respectability on the global stage. And a lot of American golfers are just saying, sure, show me the money, and I'm happy to do it. Saudi Arabia, I know that they are a big supplier of oil and they are strategically important to us. The reality still is they are not our friends. They do not like us. I don't particularly care for that country either. They were still largely the ones responsible for these 9/11 attacks 21 years ago. Just last year, 2 years ago, they abducted a U.S. resident and murdered him, Jamal Khashoggi, pretty much unapologetically. And what really galls me is so many U.S. golfers who just think that so long as there's a lot of money, I'm fine with all of this. And one thing I was really struck by was Dustin Johnson, who is all of 38 years old, reportedly is being paid more than $100 million to participate in the Live Golf Tournament, and who had said he wanted to do this because he wants the money because he doesn't want to work for the rest of his life. A, dude, you golf. B, you've already made $70 million or so before the age of 40. And now you're saying you don't want to work for the rest of your life. You don't have to. Not when you have that much money at that young age. Put it in an annuity for all I care, and your whole family's going to be set for the rest of your life. It is just shameful. I am not at all surprised that they want to have some of their tournaments at the Bedminster Golf Club Donald Trump runs, because, of course, he would be involved just as shamelessly. And I have to admit, at first I was wondering, okay, if they have a live tournament in the United States, do they play the American national anthem? Do they play a Saudi national anthem? But you know what? The proper music for this whole thing, the proper theme is just send in the clowns. That is all that this is. And it's just a disgrace that this is happening.
Matt goes musical. Jonathan Marks, what have you been saving up for us?
I actually have a shout out today and not really a rant. I've been mildly impressed with Gary Gensler, especially on the 20th anniversary of Sarbanes-Oxley, and the fact that he recognizes that there needs to be some tweaks and modifications. And I'm hoping, that he actually pushes those forward, because there's a lot of good that came about when SOX was implemented. And I think over the last 20 years, we've learned a lot. And ironically, if you go back and look at the statistics, I believe over the last couple of years, things have actually been getting a little bit worse when it comes to adverse opinions. Some of that is related to SPACs, but there's some fundamental breakdowns that are going on. And I'm a big root cause fan myself. I do believe that some of this is related to, obviously, the pressures that are being put on and folks as a result of COVID-19, and obviously the war in Russia certainly doesn't help at all. But I think some of the things that he's trying to put forth and some of the initiatives, I'm very pleased with. Big shout out to Gary. I've never met you. I'd like to meet you someday. I have some thoughts and ideas I'd like to share with you. I promise I won't punch you in the nose, but I really do think that it's about time that somebody took some initiative and tried to make things better. If the regulators are demanding that we use feedback as a mechanism in order to tweak and fine tune our programs, I think the feedback that the government was getting from everybody else that's out there should be used as well in order to tweak and fine tune their programs as well. So congratulations. Big shout out to you, my friend.
Jay Rosen, what do you have for us today?
I have an appreciation, and Matt will respond to this because he's a Bostonian like me. Bill Russell was the ultimate winner. He led the University of San Francisco to NCAA tournament championships in 1955 and 1956, won a gold medal for the U.S. Olympic team, and he led the Boston Celtics to 8 consecutive NBA titles from 1959 to 1966. In addition to that run of 8 consecutive championships, he also won one in 57 and then ended with 2 more in 1968 and 69 when he was a player coach. But that's only part of his story. It was his work on and off the court in support of racial justice, equality, which he will always be remembered, and this will be his lasting legacy. Russell was also instrumental in opening up head coaching positions for Black athletes and others. And in addition to his greatness as a player, he was also recognized a second time by the Basketball Hall of Fame as a coach. Earlier this week, Tom shared a great image in his blog tribute to Russell. Picture this: right about now, Red Auerbach, the Celtics coach during Russell's playing days, is probably twirling a stogie in anticipation of lighting up after another classic matchup between Russell and Wilt Chamberlain in the Great Beyond. I know my dad will be there too, and he'll be cheering on the show. So farewell, Bill Russell, for a life well lived.
I want to keep with a sports theme, and I want to give a huge shout out to Vin Scully. Vin Scully was the play-by-play announcer for the Los Angeles, starting with the Brooklyn Dodgers, later Los Angeles Dodgers. He literally started his broadcasting career in 1950. I think it was 2 months out of college. And for the next 67 years, he was in the play-by-play booth. I started listening to baseball in the 60s, so he called Sandy Koufax, Don Drysdale in the 70s and 80s, the Tommy Lasorda era, and then Oral Hershiser from the 90s. As we moved into the 2000s, he continued to call games. When I was a kid, the Dodgers would come to town and just stomp on the Astros. So I had a healthy dislike for the Astros, but I always loved, for the Dodgers, but I always loved Vin Scully. And when he called the World Series games that the Astros won, the one World Series the Astros won, he called those. To my eternal chagrin, he also called the Joe Montana to Dwight Clark touchdown pass, which ended the run of the 1970s Dallas Cowboys of greatness. But I want to end with a quote that Tim Erblich sent to me, which is a quote from Bob Costas, which appeared in an ESPN tribute to Vin Scully. And this is Bob Costas speaking. Somewhere around 1994 or 95, I was interviewing Ray Charles for an NBC magazine and probably spent a couple hours talking with him. Then when we're done and the cameras had been turned off, he says to me, who I'd really like to meet. And I'm thinking, he's Ray Charles. He can meet about anybody. And of course, he's probably met them. Who on earth could it be? Charles' response, Vin Scully. And I say, why? He said, well, because I love baseball, but you have to understand, to me, pictures mean nothing. It's all about the sound. And Vin Scully's broadcasts are almost musical. So I enjoy baseball so much more listening to him. So I set it up with Vin and took Ray Charles to Dodger Stadium. I was sitting across from Ray, and there was an empty seat awaiting Vin's arrival. Vin came in wearing a royal blue jacket, which is how he always turned out for his baseball broadcasts. As he walked towards Charles, he said, Ray, my name is Vin Scully, and it's a pleasure to meet you. He might as well have said a pleasant good evening to you wherever you may be, because that's how it struck Ray. And they sat down and we had a combination baseball and music discussion. And Ray Charles, and this sincerely because he's Ray freaking Charles, had one of the greatest experiences of his life. Vin Scully was not just the Dodgers announcer to me. He was our announcer. He was baseball's announcer. And I can't say enough about how he called games. I grew up listening to baseball on the radio. And so that's still my favorite format because it gives me the flexibility to have the imagination. And Vin Scully could fill in the colors. So I'm going to say goodbye to Vin Scully, even though you called the Dodgers games. Gentlemen, that concludes this episode. I can't wait to see what we can come up with next time.
Thank you, Tom.
Take care, everybody.